and it's going to be a long video. Sorry in advance. All right, let's talk business. So I mentioned this in my most recent TikTok. I said that I moved and that I started the brand, like Wandering Profit, in Calgary, Alberta, out of my parents' basement, and how to try and grow and scale the brand, I looked at moving provinces and like did move provinces to Saskatchewan. And so now I'm in a small town of about 600 people, and I'm like in the process of kind of like relaunching the brand. I'm also in the process of thinking about either a rebranding or a like kind of like partner sister brand. There are a few reasons for that. I mean, we can just go over them right now. Firstly, so the kind of partner sister rebrand that I want to do is called Respawn Roasters. The thought process there is that I was in the shower the other day, or was in the bath, and I kind of had this, I guess, like epiphany of kind of why I wanted to do that, or like what the difference was between the two. And I think that Wandering Profit really is kind of like the ideals. Like it's the ideals, it's the North Star, it's kind of like the dream. It's if everything kind of panned out the way, or pans out the way that I want it to, like it's what we're shooting for, right? It's yeah, it's the ideals, it's the hopes, it's the dreams, it's just like the utopia. Respawn Roasters is kind of, I guess, more of a realistic or personal look at like me and like as a brand and that type of stuff. Like it's got a bit more just personality, I guess, like my personality ingrained in it. And I'm not sure why I don't feel like I can do that with Wandering Profit, but my thought process is kind of this, right? Like I'm a pretty large like gamer. I've always loved playing games. Like I've always been pretty nerdy, like been into anime and like I said, video games, and you know, like Magic and fucking like just like every trading card imaginable, like Pokemon, Beyblades, like all that shit. Beyblades is not a trading card, but you know what I'm saying. And so like Respawn Roasters is kind of a way for me to combine like the nerdy side of me with like the coffee side of me. Not to say that the coffee side of me isn't nerdy, but like it's a way for me to combine like my hobbies with, you know, my business. And the reason why is because I feel like I can ingrain a bit more passion into like the products that I like put out, even just in terms of like the naming and stuff. With Wandering Profit, like my ideal is that, and I think this is where it got a little lost in the weeds, but my idea with Wandering Profit was that I just wanted it to be, and I still do, like want it to just be approachable, right? Like the coffee that I roast, I want it to be like an entry point for people into like specialty coffee. Okay, let's talk about approachability and accessibility, because I feel like that's kind of like a key thing to talk about if we're going to talk about like the ideals and goals of like Wandering Profit really quickly. I think that a lot of like specialty coffee isn't super accessible. I think like from the top down, there's a lot of like inaccessibility in terms of like the tasting notes that you see on packages and even just the cost of like not only purchasing specialty coffee but also then like properly brewing specialty coffee. Um, there's a lot that kind of goes into that if you want to, I guess, like have the desired outcome that a lot of the people, I guess, at the top that are like producing the coffees like want you to have. Kind of what I mean by that is like if you go to any specialty coffee roaster like in your area, you're gonna find bags of coffee on the shelf that have obviously tasting notes, right? At this point, tasting notes are just industry standard. You're gonna put tasting notes on any of your coffees. Now, I love that because from a consumer standpoint, it kind of like lets you gauge if you're going to be interested or not interested in the coffee potentially by like how it presents. Now, the downside to that is that, especially with like the more exotic and more experimental processes and like methods of like obviously harvesting and drying and fermenting and all that stuff, we get like more exotic and outlandish tasting notes. And that stuff just isn't super accessible. And by that I mean like, let's say I say that a coffee tastes like acai berries. Well, not only is that a subjective tasting note to me, like I'm tasting acai berries, it's something that like for you to be able to even begin to try and compare what I'm tasting to what you're tasting, you need to have that baseline of like I've tried acai berries and not just like acai juice or like acai flavored other things like raw acai berries, right? And a lot of people haven't had that experience. Like I would say that the majority of people aren't running around eating acai berries, right? It's just not like a super accessible way to describe your coffee. I think the way that I want to do it going forward, which isn't the way that I've done it in the past in Wandering Prophet, but the way that I would like to do it going forward in both Wandering Prophet and Respawn Roasters, is to describe more of like the feeling or like the sensation instead of try to describe the flavor. There are obviously multiple reasons for that. Again, the biggest one being accessibility, where I feel like if I say this tastes like caramel and nougat and whatever, those are a bit more accessible tasting notes because those are things that are more readily available or in more things. But let's say I describe a coffee that way, and then you go home and brew it, and you think like, I'm not getting any of those tasting notes. Like either now you're starting to think like, what am I doing wrong? Or you're starting to think like, what is this guy talking about, right? Like this guy has no idea what he's talking about. He can't even accurately like describe his coffee. That's one thing that I think is a struggle or like an inaccessibility within coffee. And I think it goes both ways, right? Like I said, as a consumer, it can make you think, well, like, what am I doing wrong? Why aren't I getting these notes that are described? Or why can't I pick that flavor out or whatever? And as a roaster, as a business owner, the flip side again is like people could then think, well, maybe this guy just doesn't know what he's talking about, or maybe he's out to lunch, or he's not roasting properly, or I got a bad bag. Oh, if he's describing it like this and I'm getting, these flavors that are completely different, I must have got a bad bag, and like now that's an issue. Like maybe I want a refund, or I want like a new bag sent to me, or something like that, which is all well and good, right? And I'm not saying that like bad bags don't happen, or like mistakes don't happen, or like stuff like that, right? But I think that such specificity in the realm of tasting notes, again, like specificity really comes with like the more specific something is, realistically, like the less accessible it is, or like obviously like the smaller group of people that it pertains to, which is totally fine. But that's the thing, right? Like specificity, especially in tasting notes, I think starts to kind of sway people one way or another without them even like trying your product. And I also think that that's a little unfortunate. I think that there's a lot of really great specialty coffee out there that might like have these wild tasting notes, like yuzu and stuff like that. But most people would love it. Like I think that if you put that in the hands of 90% of the people that are drinking coffee, they would really enjoy that coffee. But because of the way that it's described, a lot of people are going to go, oh, well, I don't like that type of coffee or whatever. Like, oh, I just want a normal cup, or I don't like acidic tasting coffees. I like more bold or like nutty or chocolatey coffees. And so it's going to kind of deter people away from trying that bag. Whereas I think if we can describe things, and this is the direction that I'm trying to go, my thought process is that I want to describe like the feeling and like the emotion more than the flavor that I get when tasting a coffee, because I still think that it's an important part of the experience. And I think that it is like, I'm not going to be able to rewrite how the majority of customers like pick coffees. I think people have more of an understanding of like what comfort and warmth and like the cozy feel like, as opposed to what something tastes like. If I say it tastes like, again, like yuzu or acai or birthday cake, there's a million flavors of birthday cake, you know what I mean? And so like, what if the only birthday cake I ever had was ice cream cake? And to me, that's birthday cake. And now you describe something as birthday cake and it's like angel food cake. You know what I mean? Like, we're having completely different experiences, but we're going to describe those things the same way. Like, oh, this reminds me of birthday cake. But those flavor profiles are entirely different. Anyways, so that's why I think I would like to try and describe, and again, although these emotions are felt differently and everybody, feels the emotions differently, but I think that it's a lot more relatable to describe something that way and a lot more accessible to the majority of people. Than describing with like specific food flavors. Now, selfishly, another reason why I'm doing this is because I feel like I'm a little lost in the sauce, in the sense that like, I've kind of gone all in on this business. And so like, I don't have a ton of money to spend on specialty coffee myself. If I'm thinking of like buying a bag of specialty coffee, I think like, well, that money is probably better spent like going into the business, as opposed to like buying a bag of coffee, especially when I'm in a situation where I can roast my own coffee. Now, the downside to that is I'm basically locking myself inside of an echo chamber of my own coffee and what I think tastes good. And then I'm also limiting my palate, because I'm only drinking my coffee. I'm not experiencing all the other great coffees in the world. And I'm not just drinking my coffee because I think my coffee's the best. I think my coffee's good. I do. But I think that there are some insanely talented, incredible roasters out there that produce stuff that like I could only ever dream of beginning to produce. And that kind of touches back to like what I want both of these brands to be, which is like an entry point into specialty coffee, like an accessible specialty coffee for everybody. Like, I want this to be something that like, if you're just getting into the hobby, maybe this is your first step. It's going to be approachable, but also like it's going to give you those nuanced flavors that are going to make you think like, oh man, like this is what coffee could be. This is what coffee can be, right? Like, it doesn't have to be the grocery store pre-ground, it's like throw it in the drip maker coffee. It doesn't have to be Keurig, like it can be like a real experience, right? Like it can be like drinking a beer or savoring a wine, or like eating, right? Like you can have a bunch of these nuanced flavors, and you can really take your time with the process of brewing and really make it like a routine, a meditative practice, a hobby, whatever you want it to be. And you don't have to get like super posh with it. You don't have to invest thousands of dollars. You could make coffee a hobby and make great coffee at home with like $100. If you got like a V60 style dripper, some filters, and a gooseneck kettle, you can buy all of that stuff on Amazon for probably like $20 a pop, and away you go. And now you're going to be able to brew amazing coffee at home without having to invest, thousands of dollars. Anyways, I digress. I view both of these companies as being kind of like an entry point for that, where it's like, yeah, this is, man, like this is what coffee can be. And then it gets you excited for those other guys that are roasting these incredibly special, beautiful coffees. And then you go and try those. And it's just kind of like the door. I've walked you to the door and I've cracked it open. And now, after tasting this coffee, either you decide like, oh man, like, yeah, this is for me, this is really cool, whatever, like I'm into this, or you decide, not really, like maybe, yeah, I'm actually fine with grocery store coffee, right? Like, there's nothing wrong with that, and that's totally fine, right? I fucking love a good cup of diner coffee, of just like regular drip coffee, but I also love my specialty coffee. There's nothing wrong with any way. Like if you want it, if you enjoy coffee, enjoy coffee. Like however that is, fucking go for it. But anyways, so that's all I'm saying. Like I want to kind of be like that door that kind of lets people in to the hobby, that just like gives you a glimpse of what it can be, right? Like what this beverage, what this hobby, what this community can be. I digress back to our original point, which was I've been playing around with like the potentially rebranding and making this like sister brand, and that's kind of the reason why, is because like I feel like I get a little lost in the sauce of like trying to think of these like grandiose like statements and how to make things more accessible and how to be kind of just like super approachable, and like I don't want to like alienate people, and I don't want to be like pretentious and posh or like gatekeep the hobby or the product or anything. And I want to continue that obviously like in Respawn Roasters, but also like I feel like with Wandering Prophet I've been a little too focused on that. I've been a little too focused on trying to make no enemies, and that's a me as a person problem, right? Like I'm a people pleaser. I'm the biggest fucking people pleaser in the world. Like I don't want to like rub anybody the wrong way, or I want to do right by everybody, and that's a bad way to try and do business, right? And like it's not, but also like it. And again, this is me trying to backtrack and not fucking like rub anyone the wrong way, right? But like then it's so like, because you're trying to please so many people, you're trying to do so much stuff at the same time, and that's just so difficult. And then like it just makes putting something out so incredibly hard. I always used to say this to like my artist friends, to say like my creative friends, like they always have the hardest time putting stuff out as well, right? Like either like making a video of them doing music, or like my one friend is amazing at producing music, right? Like he does kind of like EDM style music, or I should just say he produces music like electronically, and he's like incredibly talented, but trying to get him to post a video is like pulling teeth, right? Or like post a track on SoundCloud or something, it's like pulling teeth, even though he's like incredibly talented. But it's because when he listens to his track, right, all he hears are all the flaws. It's like, oh, like that's flat, or that is off-timed, or like whatever it is. But when I listen to the track, I'm like, fuck, this is a banger, right? Like this song's unreal. I think that's just the issue when you're trying to like create and put something out in the world, is like as the person creating it, and we all know this, like you're your harshest critic, right? Like you're gonna look at it and you're gonna see all of the flaws. But the people that are gonna consume what you put out there aren't gonna see that thing. And yeah, some of them are, but those are gonna be like a hard minority, right? Unless what you put out there absolutely fucking blows. But even then, like there's gonna be an audience of people that support you and like what you're doing, right? And so that's kind of the issue that I'm running into, I think, especially with like Wandering Prophet Coffee, and with me trying to like kind of, I guess like reach these like lofty ideals that I have for it, which I do want to get to, like I really do, and I really think that I can get to where I want it to be. But I also think that like I'm getting lost in the sauce on the way up, and I'm letting all of that stuff like hold me back. The idea with like Respawn Roasters is to just be like a little bit more raw and a little bit more exposed and a little bit more me, and just like promote also like through things that I love, right? Like promote by live streaming video games, and like promote through like naming the coffees like wacky shit. Like I'm playing a lot of Helldivers 2 right now. Liberty is a huge fucking meme in that game. It's a great pun. Have a cup of Liberty. But like maybe I'm gonna do something like, and try and work coffee in there, right? Like democracy. It's a work in progress. That's where I'm at. Anyways, like and Wandering Prophet can be that, and I don't know why I feel the need to like rebrand to do that. Um, but I also think it's because like again, I don't want to alienate people, right? And so I would love to push Respawn Roasters towards like let's make it like gamey and let's promote it kind of as like to like a niche audience, and then have Wandering Prophet be like this more like approachable thing to everyday people, right? Just how I'm talking about like accessibility in coffee, like that's what I want Wandering Prophet to be. I want it to be accessible. I want people to like not feel intimidated or like they're not part of the group or they're not in on the joke, right? Like I don't want them to feel that way. I want them to just feel welcomed. I want them to feel like they can grab a bag and try it and drink it and enjoy it no matter what, right? Whereas like with Respawn Roasters, I feel like that might not be the case because it's going to be a bit more targeted towards like a hobby niche. And anyway, so that's why like the two things. Now I'm in Saskatchewan, and I like realistically have just been like struggling to get things like back up. It's been a real like tough, I guess like mental switch to go from like I don't know. This is the first time I've ever moved, right? Like I said, like I was born and raised in Calgary. Um, and it's been a really big switch for me to like move provinces and not be near any of my friends and family, and really kind of just like I guess just be fully adult in the sense that like I have nobody to lean on besides my partner. And that's not to say that I can't lean on my family and friends, right? Like they are amazing and supportive no matter how far away they are. But you know what I mean, right? Like mom and dad aren't 25 minutes down the road if anything fucking goes wrong, if my car breaks down or something like that, right? And I realize that's a privileged thing to say because not everybody has that, but I've been fortunate enough in my life to have that. And so I've been adjusting to that. And unfortunately, because of that, I feel like the business has kind of taken a back seat in the move. Like there's been a lot of adjustment for me. And I'm not very good at like balancing a lot of things going on in life. I'm a really minimal dude and I have a very minimal amount of bandwidth in my brain to dedicate like to multiple things. Like when my brain is set on one thing, it like that one thing gets my brain's full attention, and like I will absorb that one thing like a sponge, but it doesn't leave room for a lot of other stuff. And maybe that's not an ideal property to have, characteristic or personality trait to have as like someone that's trying to start a business. But I guess the ideal there is that I'm trying to find a way to make sure that like the business and stuff doesn't ever fall to the wayside like it has. And I'm hoping that like the busier and more successful the company gets, like the less possible that is, right? Like with its current state anyways, like I really haven't had any orders like since December anyways. I think the last order I did was for my mom's boss for Christmas. When the company's not doing anything, it's easy, same thing. It's easy for it to fall wayside. Like when I'm not getting orders, when, like I'm not getting new beans in to roast and that type of stuff. My current struggle and my current like goal is to kind of, and which I'm, working towards now, and this is kind of proof of that, of like, again, creating content and putting stuff out, is to bring the business more back to the forefront. And like the more that I push and the more that I create and the more that I get the business out there and get it in front of people and get my coffee in front of people and get people trying it and that type of stuff, like the harder it is for the business to fall to kind of the back of mind, the harder it is for it to get displaced when other stuff is going on, right? Because like I said, my brain only has room for like 3 things, and at least when I can start, focusing a bit more on the business, like now, and it gets busier and gets into more people's, peripheral, then it'll be harder for it to fall out of like my 3 things. But it's a grind. Like I said, that's my challenge right now, is to keep it there, to keep grinding, to keep my head in it and on it, until it gets to the point where it's busy and just like isn't ignorable. Anyways, cheers. Thanks for hanging out. and it's going to be a long video. Sorry in advance. But this is also me, right? And this is like the stuff that I want to put out, and like I want to be raw, and I want to be like in front of people. And I realize that like I love to hear myself speak. I love to ramble. Like I love to tell stories and just like kind of I get lost in it. But that's who I am, and that's what the brand is. And thanks for hanging out. Cheers. Bye. Love you. Come here, say bye.